Welcome to the Potter Discussion.
Welcome back to the Potter Discussion. This is episode 87, and on today's episode, we will be discussing Neville Longbottom and his very best moments. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Potter Discussion. This is episode 87, and boy, it is good to be back. Those last two episodes were actually pre-recorded. I was just a little bit busy, so I couldn't get to the microphone at that moment, but I am back now, and I am so excited because today we are talking about Neville. He is so underappreciated, but so big in the story. I think it is very important to talk about him, and that is exactly what we are doing today. Before we get started, I am going to remind you that those two links are in the show notes below if you have any questions, comments, topics, Quizmaster questions, or even jokes that you want to submit to the show. There's a SpeakPipe page link that you can click and you'll be all set. There's also a Google form to submit a text submission, and if you don't want to do either of those, you can send me an email. My email is thepotterdiscussion@gmail.com. That is thepotterdiscussion@gmail.com. And if you're wondering why there is that awesome voiceover at the beginning of the intro music, that is because Mike Russell just made me that voiceover, and it was so amazing. I am so happy with it. So if you want to go check out Mike Russell, I will link his YouTube channel in the description below. Please go check him out if you like audio. If you're an audio person, go give him some love. That would be amazing for me, for him, and I really appreciate what he did for me. So if you could just click that link, it'll be the very first link. Click that, go to his YouTube channel, and just check it out. You know, even if you're not an audio person, you might find some things that you like. But without further ado, let's get into this episode. Kicking it off at number 10, we have Neville returning to Hogwarts after failing in almost every subject, and it's sad, but fortunately, it is true. Neville struggled very much in school, and the only subject he was good at was herbology. He got an O, an outstanding in herbology, I think for his owl. So that is really fantastic, and outstanding is very, very great, especially for Neville, and that really saved him from, just staying in 5th year and from taking the OWLs again, which would have been very difficult, and not something that would have been very, very fun for Neville. So I am glad he did something good in his life. Getting an outstanding, that was really a great thing for him. And after doing that, after the whole thing, the Battle of Hogwarts, he went back to teach. Neville Longbottom went back to teach. That deserves a round of applause. He taught herbology, of course, but it really was a punch in the face for all the people who doubted him and thought that he couldn't do something like what he did. He went back and he really excelled in something that he loved to do, which is something that I don't think many people can do. You like something, but you rarely actually get a job in that field. Like if you love planets, you probably aren't going to be an astronaut, but you can still love planets. And Neville loved plants. That was actually oddly similar. Neville loved plants, but he still got a herbology job at Hogwarts. And at Hogwarts, no less. Being a Hogwarts teacher is one of the hardest jobs there are. And it's still very much of a mystery of what the Hogwarts teachers really do besides teach. But going back to teach herbology after all those years, after failing a lot of subjects, he really pulled ahead and was a really great asset to the school, as I might imagine. And that was something that everyone really was, it was so fitting. It was so fitting for Neville Longbottom to go back and teach the subject he was best in, which was really, really amazing and fitting. And that's just number 10. We got 9 more to go. And coming in at number 9, we have Neville mastering Expelliarmus with Dumbledore's army. Now, this might feel like something that isn't a big discovery and something that is really important, but for Neville, it is. Expelliarmus is a very useful charm. It blasts your opponent's wand out of their hand and flings it across the room or wherever you are dueling. And that was a spell that Harry made sure to teach Dumbledore's army. And that was really smart of him because he used Expelliarmus in the final battle, defeating Voldemort, which is real. Okay, I'm laughing at that scene. I just finished a Harry Potter rewatch of the movies, and that duel, it gets me every time because the way they duel, I mean, like, that's the beginning is fine. I know it's like so dramatic. They're like crawling towards their wands. They get it. Then they start, and that was good. And then we see the snake. Neville destroys the snake, which is maybe coming up, foreshadowing. And then they Voldemort's like, ah. And then they start, like, the last time Voldemort locks wands with anyone. Voldemort's expressions, it is hilarious every time I see it because he's like, I don't know what he's doing, but he's like he's trying to, like, lay an egg. That's what his face is like. He's like he's trying to lay an egg. And then when the wand flies out of his hand, Harry, like, does the spell. And then his face, the wand flies out of his hand, and he's so dumbfounded. And oh my gosh, I am sorry, but I had to say that. But yeah, the bottom line, Expelliarmus is a very useful spell. And Neville mastered it. Like, it took him a while, but he did it, which was really amazing. And we saw how hard it was for him to just cast spells in general, which is a bit of a problem because spells is how you do things in the wizarding world. But Neville made a lot of progress on the necessities of being a wizard, including Expelliarmus, which was just amazing to see. When he finally did it, and everyone was just like, "My gosh, Neville, good job." That is when you knew Neville did it right. Neville did something that is amazing, and everyone congratulated him for it. Rightfully, of course. Yeah, let's move on. And at number 8, we have helping Harry in the Ministry. A really fantastic thing that Neville did that was somewhat overlooked. So if you aren't caught up and if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the Order of the Phoenix, the 5th book, the vision of Sirius being tortured by Voldemort in the Department of Mysteries came to Harry, and he rushed off to get his friends. They were ambushed by Umbridge, and this whole thing happened, but eventually, they went to the Ministry of Magic to rescue Sirius. But Sirius wasn't there. Voldemort gave Harry a vision, put it inside his head, and I hate to say it worked, and Harry and his friends were ambushed. And they fought. They fought their way out, and they did a fantastic job of it too. Especially Neville. We did see Neville in the background casting some very, very cool spells, and I'm not sure if we actually saw him doing, as a feature, but he was dueling his heart out, and that was very, very nice to see. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he might have disarmed a Witcher wizard or two. I don't know. So that just goes to show Neville is a really great wizard, and he really shined through in the Battle of the Ministry of Magic, and that was a really fantastic scene for Neville, and it is something that Neville really did fantastic. That was a really great job on his part. So good job, Neville. That was great. And at number 7, we have Neville standing up to the Carrows and keeping the DA alive in the 7th book. That was a very difficult thing for Neville to do because the Carrows were really nasty. They tortured students, and they made them torture themselves, which is a monstrous thing to do, but the Carrows did it anyway, and the students would be punished for doing anything remotely close to being out of line, and Snape was making things horrible at Hogwarts, but Neville kept the DA alive. I think it was Neville and Luna that did it the most, but Neville, I think, definitely initiated it because Neville and Luna really didn't have any friends besides DA. All they really had was each other. So starting the DA up back again and using those gold coins to communicate, Neville, yeah, that was pretty good. Pretty cool of Neville to start up this whole new thing and create a whole different universe for the time at Hogwarts, because going into the 7th year, that was the darkest time by far for anyone in, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, or Ravenclaw. I mean, the Slytherins are doing just fine, but no one else was, which was pretty unfortunate because that was a very, very difficult time, and they needed some form of light, which Neville provided. But we did see they were still a little down, but I can pretty much guarantee that was not Neville's fault, because being down in the DA means something really bad was happening. In other words, the Carrows. And in the book, he did so much more. Everyone stood up to the Carrows and Snape, but Neville really did his part in making Hogwarts Castle a very, very nice place, at least some of the time. When Neville gave Harry the gillyweed, that was another one of the best things Neville could have ever thought of. And I am going to go off the movie for this one because I know in the book it was Dobby, but in the movie it was Neville. Neville gave Harry gillyweed, and that was something that literally saved Harry's life, because as Harry said himself, there's no way you can survive underwater for an hour without anything to help you, but Harry did it with Neville's help. Of course, maybe Mad-Eye Moody did some initiating on that part, but it was still Neville who thought of the idea, and Neville literally saved Harry's life in that moment, which is something that Neville could have really used. He was, I think, in the 4th year, that was really the point where everyone was kind of like becoming who they were. Harry was really becoming, someone who was great at magic and spells. Hermione was, I think, taking, her job more seriously and thinking about what she wanted to do in the future. Ron, not so much, but the point is, everyone was figuring out what they wanted to do. But Neville, I don't know. And saving someone's life with a plant really helped his decision along. And, of course, the great line, "Oh my gosh, I've killed Harry Potter," it will forever stay in our hearts, because that was something that Neville genuinely believed, and it really scared him that he may have killed Harry. And that just shows the friendship that Neville shares with Harry and the bonds he can make if he has a great friends and a great environment. So Neville really thrived with that decision, and he decided what he wanted to do with his life now that he realized that plants were his passion. So that was a very interesting scene to see how Neville took it, how he, reacted when he realized that Harry Potter was not in fact dead, and how Neville managed to come out of that situation with a more positive outcome. So that was a very, very nice scene to see Neville thriving in, and I think everyone was really happy for him. Now, this next moment for Neville is really a great tie-up for everything we have talked about so far, and that is number 5, overcoming his doubts and making a successful life. For Neville, That's tough. Just imagine, put yourself in Neville's shoes. You really are struggling in most of your subjects. You don't know what you're gonna do. Then it clicks, and you make a very successful life. You do so many great things. And that was really a great moment for Neville, because if everything we've been talking about so far hasn't happened, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He probably wouldn't have ended up in the job he had. He might not even have had a job, and he would have not led a very successful life. But overcoming everything that he was but overcoming everything that was thrown at him was really something that should be recognized as so hard. Overcoming life challenges is unbelievably difficult when you don't know how to do that. If you don't know how to solve a math problem and someone tells you to solve it, you can't. And that's what Neville was going through. Someone gave him this thing called a life and said, okay, go on and make it good. How could you do that? You can't. But Neville did. He used every tool he had. He used his brain, he used his love for plants, and he put something together. I love plants and I'm good at herbology. What do? I become a teacher. And that's something that really worked. He really was a great teacher, and he led a good life after that. So for Neville to overcome these challenges, I don't think anyone else could have done that. And I'm not saying that just because, it's a Neville episode, but I'm saying that because it's true. If you come from the bottomest of bottoms, you go to the toppest of tops. And Neville really, really did that. He had to grow up much faster than he needed to. But I must say, he did it very gracefully. And Neville ended up in a very, very good position that I feel like no one else could have thrived in. But Neville did, because he had the tools and he brought himself up so far that getting to where he was, not a problem at all. The Battle of Hogwarts was a very transformative moment for Neville. Neville had to go through many things, and this is kind of what this next collection of things is going to be about. Neville overcoming his challenges and doing some pretty awesome things. So, we're kicking it off with number 4, destroying the bridge. That was funny. That was epic. That was powerful. That was meaningful. There was so much packed into that one action that Neville did that I don't really think anyone else could have done it. Okay, let's just list off the awesomeness of this scene. Let's start with the spell. I want to know that spell. What was that? It was like boom, 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 kind of like Filibuster's fireworks, but then it was like, oh no, we're actually gonna split, and it was like, pew, going down the joints, and then, it started exploding from the back, and you could see Neville running, and then he jumped, and no one knows. But then, he went up in his wand, and he was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm alive, ooh, that went well, and then everyone in the audience was like, yes. And every time, I am so worried for Neville. But I've seen that movie so many times, I don't know why I am. But he's just such an important character in the Battle of Hogwarts that I'm worried for him. Every time I see that scene, I'm like, oh no, Neville. But it turns out okay, because I think he could survive pretty much anything. So that's nice. And it's also a really meaningful scene because he kills a lot of Snatchers, and those Snatchers, I don't know what kind of crowd technology they use to, make all those Snatchers on screen, but oh boy, that was pretty cool. And they were how many? Like probably at least 1,000 Snatchers there. There's so many, and Neville destroyed the bulk of them by far. With that one spell that he survived, that he cast, that he came up with the idea of war, and he executed. So, really great job. Absolutely fantastic. I'm still going on and on about this, but I just love the way he did it. I absolutely love the way Neville executed this, and yeah, really, really great on his part. Love the bridge scene, and let's move on to some other awesome scenes. As we all know, a worthy Gryffindor can only be decided by a couple of things, most prominent of which is pulling the sword of Gryffindor out of the sorting hat, which Neville did. When Harry was presumably dead, Voldemort and the remainder of the Death Eaters marched on Hogwarts, and Voldemort, I love that scene every time, but that's not the point. The point is, Voldemort says, "Come forward and join me, or die." And Lucius does his thing. He's like, "Draco, come on, Draco." And then Draco doesn't move. And then Narcissa says, "Draco, let's come on." And then Draco comes. I don't know, character clues. Maybe he likes Narcissa more, but that's not important. What important is, then Neville steps forward. And the first time watching this, I'm pretty sure this is what everyone's reaction was. They said, "Neville? Why Neville?" And then Voldemort goes, "Well, I must admit I'd hoped for better." And then he says, "Well, but I'm sure I could find a place for you in our ranks," which was amazing. And then he says, "I'd like to say something." Neville says, "I'd like to say something." And then, okay, the way Ray Fiennes did that, he was trying to calm himself with his hand. He was like, "Okay." If your homework is to watch that scene, it is so funny. It is so funny. So the way Voldemort just goes, "Okay," you can imagine his thought process. Just amazing. But again, that's not the point. Let's just, get to the point here. Neville goes on to give his speech. And Neville says things like, people die every day, but Harry is still with us in our hearts. And he didn't die in vain. But then he says to Voldemort, "You will." Very, very powerful. And then he pulls the sword of Gryffindor out of the hat. And boy, oh boy, that scene was... that was amazing. He pulls the sword of Gryffindor out of the hat, and then Harry goes, whoop, rolls off Hagrid, and then runs away, and the Battle of Hogwarts commences. That was so amazing. That was the best scene ever. Because Neville triggered the whole end part of the Battle of Hogwarts. And he pulled the sword out of the hat, which is a pretty good segue into the next point that I will go over right now. And that segue is leading to this next one, which is number 9, Scene 2, Killing Nagini. If you're wondering why this wasn't number 1, there was, a little bit of a more impressive scene that was going on. But this scene was also very exciting. It was amazing. So, Neville pulled the sword out of a hat, and then unfortunately, he was blasted back. Then he woke up, and a flying body flew past him, but there was a cut to Ron and Hermione, who were trying to kill Nagini. Hermione threw some rocks at it. Ron was approaching with a basilisk fang, and then Nagini turned and pounced. And the basilisk fang flew over the edge of the railing. And what happened? They couldn't do anything. And Ron and Hermione ran. They fell into a pile of rocks. Ron tried one last-ditch effort, but it didn't work. Nagini was approaching, and then Neville goes whoosh. And the Horcrux is destroyed. Neville Longbottom, yes, that is right, folks. Neville Longbottom destroyed Nagini, the one Horcrux that Voldemort was trying the hardest to protect. Now, that might be because it was a snake, but also because it was the last one, and Neville destroyed the last Horcrux. I'm going to say it again. Neville Longbottom destroyed the last Horcrux. Just amazing. The way Neville pulls these things off, someday I'm going to get his autograph, and then I'm going to say, "I got Neville Longbottom's autograph." I'm going to be so cool. But that was a really, really big scene because, okay, 1, Sword of Gryffindor, 2, Nagini dead, and 3, Horcrux destroyed. And I'm kind of seeing Nagini being killed and the Horcrux being destroyed as two different things, because Nagini is kind of Voldemort's symbol. That's his pet. So if you kill the symbol of Voldemort, you're almost, killing his reputation. And that was big, and that was a big thing. But also, it was a Horcrux. So kind of a 2-for-1 deal. Killing the snake, destroying Voldemort's symbol of power, and destroying a Horcrux, the very last Horcrux. And then that's when the final, I can't think about it, I'm gonna laugh too hard. And then that's when the final duel started, and, that whole thing went down. So, the way Neville pulled that off, really impressive, really fantastic, and really amazing. But let's move on to number 1, because it might surprise you. And now we are here. This is the final reason. This is the final scene. This is it. So, it's a little bit of a surprise, I will tell you. But this scene is very well summed up by something that Dumbledore said. And right when I say this, you're going to know what scene I'm talking about. But Dumbledore said it in the first book. He said, standing up to your enemies is very difficult. But standing up to your friends is much harder. That's not the exact quote, but that's what I got from it. So now do you know what scene I'm talking about? That's right. When Harry and his friends set out from the Gryffindor common room, trying to get to the trapdoor before Snape did, Neville stopped them. He said, I'm gonna fight you. I'm gonna fight you, Harry. Put him up. Let's go. That was great. That was what Matthew Lewis auditioned on, too, so that was awesome. I love that one. I love that scene. This is too funny. This is supposed to be powerful. Okay, I'm laughing too much. So, Neville stood up to Harry and his friends, which was absolutely amazing. And this is number 1 because what Dumbledore said was absolutely true. Standing up to your friends is so much harder than standing up to your enemies. If you go up to your school bully, you go, hey, I don't like what you're doing to me, please stop. It's so much harder to go up to your friend and say, I don't like what you're doing, don't do that anymore. Even you can try it. You can try it. It is so hard. It's so hard to, admit some kind of negative thing to your friend than admit some kind of negative thing to your enemy, which is exactly what Neville did. And that really shows his character, and it really sets in stone the fact that Neville is very, very capable of doing what he did. Doing the thing that almost no one else could complete, standing up to Harry. Harry Potter, no less, I might add. And that's why this is at number 1. That's why it is above standing up to all of his enemies. That's why this is the first. And I think that is a perfect way to end this episode. I am trying out a new editing software, so it might sound a little weird as I'm getting used to it, but just bear with me, please. This is how I make the show. This is how I make the show good. So that's cool. If you are hearing this, that means you care a little bit about me. So yeah, that's happening. But if you have any questions, comments, or topics that you would like to hear on the podcast, definitely send me an email. My email is thepotterdiscussion@gmail.com. That is thepotterdiscussion@gmail.com. If you could just scroll down in your podcast type of choice, tap those 5 stars, or even leave a written review, that could help me out more than you could ever know, and it helps other listeners find the show. As always, use information to your advantage, and I will see you later.